Hello, my name is Luke Salvia. I am a junior at Iowa State University. I am studying industrial design and product development. And what if I told you conflict management is a key player in developing your success in the workplace? A little bit about my professional industry. I conducted some interviews and did some research about what I plan to do with my career post Iowa State. Um, I actually developed connect with Tommy Hilfiger through a close family friend, and I had reached out to one of their staff members based on this connection that I had made, and I got a chance to talk with him a little bit and conduct an interview. And what I found was truly amazing, basically based on the topic that we had been studying, conflict management, and also just a little bit about what I've been studying in the workplace. I'm studying in the workplace and basically studying at school how the real world kind of matches up with the different kind of topics we're learning about in academia. And what I found through this was kind of crazy how it could be so different yet so similar at the same time. And what I mean by that is professionally and educationally they're practicing a lot of the same things that we're being taught, but they're applying it in different ways, and they're also kind of speeding things up a lot quicker than we would personally do them at school, which is probably for many good reasons. So I also got a chance to talk to them a little bit about our main topic, our group topic, conflict management. And this was very kind of eye-opening for me too, because I've been researching all these articles on conflict management. And it was interesting to me to see kind of like how what I had been reading about kind of translates to um, real world situations, and especially in a creative environment like Tommy Hilfiger, where there are many different creative minds in one close area. Conflict management is crucial to the success of the company, um, because there are going to be such a different, diverse range of ideas. Um, so basically, after all my research and after my interviews, I believe that conflict management is one of the most crucial, if not the most crucial, skill of having in a work environment. Knowing how to diffuse a conflict and knowing how to make everybody feel like they're contributing without feeling kind of like stomped over is very important. So, what I read a little bit about in my article was learning how to take a little bit of each important idea and mixing that into one cohesive idea that everyone can feel proud of. And what was very unique about that is um, the common thing that I found through my interview and through reading this article is that there always has to be a mediator that is not always involved in the particular topic, but a mediator that is involved in the company, obviously, and knows what is best for the well-being. And I thought it was very interesting that having this mediator proves so vital for the development and the success of a company. So I would say that after hearing that or reading that article and asking questions to this person that worked in Tommy Hilfiger that I had talked with, kind of finding the overlaps in that and how that is actually plays out in real world industry. So when I asked him about it, um, he had basically told me that when they're discussing different ideas about different projects that they're going to develop, um, they have a project manager that kind of oversees everybody's different thoughts on a particular product and designs of the product that kind of um, likes to pick the positive parts out of everyone's idea and bring it all into one cohesive idea that's both beneficial to the company as well as the consumer. So he went on to tell me a story about how he had developed this product, that he was so into it, so attached to it, he thought it was going to be the best thing in the world, and he had gotten into some arguments with some of his colleagues about, I think it was kind of the practicality of the product, and how it wouldn't be practical and it wouldn't appeal to a large consumer base, and how maybe he should dial back. And obviously, him being so attached to the work, he kind of got upset, which obviously will happen. So I thought that was kind of interesting to hear a real world comparison based to like an article that's very hard to it's kind of hard to take away the main points of. So that real world comparison of him getting into this conflict and diffusing it into something that could be productive was very eye-opening to me. So all in all, I found that conducting this interview as well as reading these articles on conflict management is going to be very beneficial for me and my group members as we move on into our professional careers. Thank you for listening.
Hey guys, my name's Michael Wagner, and I'm a French major with a teaching English as a second language minor. My interview was with Amy Cash, who's a traveling nurse, and I chose to interview her because she's had a lot of experience in multicultural regions of both the US and some US territories. And a lot of what she said during the interview reminded me of topics that were discussed both in the textbook and also the research article that I read for this assignment. During my interview with Amy, I really did get to know a lot about her conflict management styles. And when I was talking to her, it was really easy to realize that Amy's a super extroverted person. And she said that her personality actually stays the exact same whenever she's at work. I asked her how she manages conflict normally, and she said that it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. But after asking a few more questions, I'd have to say that whenever Amy's caring for patients, she goes to super great lengths to be as accommodating as she can possibly be. But unfortunately, there are times that Amy can't really fulfill a patient's request. For example, some patients bring oils or ointments from home and ask Amy to apply them onto their body, but since they aren't issued by the hospital, Amy has to be really firm and deny the request. However, whenever Amy's dealing with doctors or other nurses, Amy either has to have a collaborative or a dominating attitude. The article that I read used the word dominating, wherever the textbook uses the word competing. So in most instances, Amy has to really quickly collaborate with her team to resolve whatever issue's going on with the patient and make sure that they get the proper treatment. But there are times when collaborating isn't really that easy, so Amy kind of has to switch to a dominating conflict management style. She actually said that she doesn't really have time to deal with doctors that have a superiority complex whenever she's trying to save a patient's life. I'd have to say that the majority of conflict in Amy's work environment is task conflict, which is basically just any sort of conflict that arises because of work-related issues. She does have a little bit of relationship conflict because of the way she's treated, which was actually pretty apparent from her comment earlier about doctors with superiority complexes. And for my research, I read a 2017 article called Personality Traits and Conflict Management Styles in Predicting Job Performance, which was written by Ayub et al. This article was really thorough in studying the relationship between the big 5 personality traits, which are agreeableness, conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism, and openness. Some sort of conflict perceived, which is either task or relationship. I mentioned earlier that task conflict is just any sort of conflict that derives from work, and relationship conflict is just any sort of interpersonal conflict. They also discuss the conflict management styles, so that's avoiding, compromising, dominating, integrating, and obliging, which are all pretty synonymous to the 5 that were used in our textbook. The studies show that extroverted workers may be perceived as overly assertive. I believe that this is definitely true in Amy's case, especially when she's working with people that might have more authority than her, but the same level of skill or experience. I feel like it only makes sense that extroverts would be more assertive whenever they're faced with conflict, as opposed to, like, let's say, avoiding conflict. The book says that avoiding conflict actually has some short-term benefits, which I feel like extroverts would definitely try to avoid since they're considered the people persons. As for the other findings in the research article, it said that agreeable people definitely do tend to use the avoiding approach to conflict. I know that avoidance is normally seen as not answering phone calls or denying whether or not something happened, or just repressing some of your emotions, but sometimes avoidance can actually be pretty beneficial. So, like, it's really important to pick and choose your battles, and hopefully you're not having too much conflict at work, but in my experience, it's really important to either let things slide or be really adamant about some things that, like, actually have a lot of weight to them. One thing that I thought was really interesting in this article was that they found that agreeable people tend to perceive the least amount of conflict, but yet they have the most issues with relational conflict. The study also said that neurotic people had a tendency to take control of situations through assertion, just like extroverted people do. But the difference between neurotic people and extroverted people is that neurotic people tend to play up their emotions, whereas extroverted people they normally just be themselves in a situation. People that were viewed as more open and willing to express their emotions and ideas had an entirely neutral influence on conflict perception, which I thought was actually sort of neat. But whereas conscientious workers were pretty equal to the open individuals in the sense that they sort of had a neutral stance on any perceived conflict, but conscientious people were actually a bit more likely to openly approach conflict. So overall, I think that the most important thing that I learned from this conflict is that it's super important to get to know your coworkers and definitely do your best to keep them happy. And whenever there is some kind of conflict, just use your best judgment as to whether to let it slide or embrace it and resolve it as soon as you can. Also, Amy Cash cannot stress enough how important it is to not let your superiors make you feel insignificant. And since conflict is something that we can't really avoid, Jordan's gonna get into the specifics of progressiveness versus traditional roots in an organization. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Jordan Childs. I am a senior at Iowa State University studying event management. I've had the great privilege of interviewing 3 people that are in my fields that I will potentially be entering after graduation. Throughout our discussions, we talked about the conflicts between different departments and how to overcome them with ways that worked and some ways that did not. They have opened my eyes to future solutions, not only in my current job, but also in my future endeavors. Like every job, there are a set of rules of how the company is run, the do's and the don'ts that help a business stay as successful as it is. In the article, The Conflict Over Conflict Management by David Lipsky and Ariel Avgar, it discusses how a workplace develop policies and procedures to help address conflicts. Instead of waiting for a problem to occur, then figure out the problem. The article discusses how there are 2 types of views. One is a progressive view, whereas the other one is more traditional view on conflicts. The traditional view is having the managers deal with the solution by either suppressing or eliminating it altogether. For the progressive view, they have created a web of rules that is focused on the relationship between the employees and the employers. A traditional way that Julie discussed at Heartland does is simply having a meeting with their boss and the associate that has the problems. Before she explained to me how this may cause more problems, I thought back to problems that I had with my past job of people denying what the other one has said and or changing the story. Julie confirmed that this is what happened a lot, and so they are trying to figure out a new way of handling things. While interviewing Michaela and Lindsay, who both work at Sam's Club in Ames, Michaela is the marketing coordinator and Lindsay is the team lead coordinator. I asked her how the company handles complaints by the other associates, and she explained to me that they have what is called an open door policy. What that is anyone can talk to a manager anonymously if they do not feel comfortable talking directly to the associate. about the problem or concerns that they have in the work performances. One problem that they have had with the system is people finding out who has open doored them, and it has made situations worse before they got a chance to be better. The program has a lot of potential, but also has some kinks that need to be fixed. A way to compromise between the traditional way and new ways of dealing with the conflict is trying both options and seeing which one best works with the setting. Everyone comes from a different background and may handle things in a different way. There are many ways of handling conflicts when it comes to associates and customers that come from a traditional background of certain rules rather than people that have grown up with a different background of being open to hearing other people's opinions and finding a middle ground. Every company has their own way of handling the situation. They now need to learn how to deal with the associates that have the conflict.
Alright, so overall we kind of talked about how conflict is basically inevitable, so it's really important to create a really sort of cohesive work environment so you can sort of avoid conflict in the first place, so it doesn't even occur in the first place. However, whenever there is conflict, since it is inevitable, having an impartial mediator or some sort of management is pretty essential. We also talked about how there are different conflict management styles that are associated with different personality traits, and the importance of not only knowing your coworkers and their traits, but also knowing yourself so you can sort of get an idea of how you can potentially handle conflict whenever it arises. And lastly, we talked about how sometimes the traditional do's and don'ts in an organization can either work out for better or for worse than some progressive ideals in the work environment. And most of the time it's pretty important to sort of compromise between the two. And lastly, thank you so much for watching our presentation about conflict management.